abyss beckons with a chilling call. Come closer, listen to the shadows draw. So subscribe and like, and don't be afraid to dive into the darkness where the shadows are laid. Tales from the shadows will spook your world. Join us on this journey, let your fears unfurl. Stay tuned, stay weird, and watch out for what lurks in the shadows.
Welcome, friends, to the dark and the deep, where whispers linger and shadows creep. Tales from the shadows, where legends arise, with ghostly stories and myths that mesmerize. We continue our tale, picking up right where we left off. The aftermath of the battle weighed heavily on Denny and his friends as they trudged through the thick, shadow-laden woods of Jotunheim. The sharp scent of iron and sweat clung to them, mingling with the musty, frost-laden air. Every step felt like a test of their will, a reminder of what they had survived and had yet to face. Celine walked with a pronounced limp, her bow loosely over her shoulder. A sharp intake of breath accompanied each step she took, but she kept her eyes fixed ahead, determined but weary. Eric's shield was battered and splattered with dark ichor, the edge bent from deflecting blow after blow. A grim, distant stare had replaced his usual confident smirk that mirrored Denny's own. "We need to rest," Denny said, breaking the tense silence. His voice was hoarse, rough from shouting commands and spells during the battle. He glanced around at his friends, each bearing the scars of the skirmish, some visible, others buried deeper. Celine sighed and nodded, collapsing against the broad trunk of an ancient tree. Its gnarled roots curled around her feet as if offering an embrace. Eric dropped to the ground beside her, letting out a long, weary breath as he inspected the damage to his shield, wincing when his fingers brushed a resounding crack. Denny stood for a moment longer, taking in the scene. The dark energy of the creatures they had fought still seemed to cling to the forest, like a poisonous mist that refused to disperse. He ran a hand over Gungnir, whose surface was calm and oddly reassuring. Closing his eyes, he replayed the battle in his mind, the moment he drove the spear through the monstrous leader's chest, the roar that followed, the sickening silence that came after. It had been a victory, but it felt hollow. "We won," Celine said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "But it doesn't feel like a win." "It's not over," Eric muttered. He glanced warily at the dark forest, expecting another foe to emerge from the shadows. Not even close. A rustling noise made them all tense, the fatigue in their muscles forgotten as adrenaline surged once more. Denny's eyes snapped open, and he raised Gungnir instinctively. The noise grew louder, and then with a sudden crack, a spectral figure stepped out from between the trees. Clad in ancient armor, its eyes glowed a cold, unsettling blue. It stood motionless, staring directly at Denny. "Who are you?" Denny called out, stepping forward as the spear in his grip pulsed faintly. The apparition's voice was thin and cold like wind scraping over ice. "A precursor, son of Odin. The battle you fought was but a shadow of the true storm. Prepare yourself, for the darkness that comes will test your heart, and not all will endure." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Before Denny could react, the figure dissolved into a swirl of blue mist, leaving them in stunned silence. Eric's laugh was shaky and humorless. "Great, more bad omens." Celine, though exhausted, forced a small, wry smile. "Seems like fate just can't leave us alone." She glanced at Denny, her eyes solemn. "What do we do now?" Denny looked at his friends, the weight of the warning pressing against his chest. They were all battered, their wounds both physical and emotional, yet there was a glimmer of resolve in their eyes. He tightened his grip on Gungnir, its reassuring hum resonating through him. "We prepare," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We find out what this darkness is and face it together." The forest fell silent again, the chill biting deeper into their skin. Whatever lay ahead, the battle they had just survived was only the prelude. Denny knew that the war to come would demand more from them, from him, than he was sure they could give. But as Celine and Eric exchanged determined glances and nodded, a fragile thread of hope began to weave through the cold, dark forest. And for the first time since the battle's end, Denny allowed himself a moment of belief that they would endure, that they would fight, and that, Maybe they would survive what came next. As the ghostly figure's warning faded into silence, Denny felt a chill spread through his chest, colder than the air of Jotunheim. He met Eric's gaze, searching for any trace of reassurance, but found only the same apprehension reflected at him. "I don't like this," Eric said, rubbing his temples. His fingers came away with smears of dried blood from a gash hidden beneath his hair. "First, we fight a horde of frost creatures. Then a spectral messenger tells us we're not even close to the end. What's next? A visit from Hel herself?" Selene shivered at the mention of the goddess of death, pulling her cloak tighter around her. "Let's not invite any more bad luck, Eric," she muttered, though her voice carried a trace of nervous laughter. Denny looked up at the twisted branches that clawed at the grey sky above them, blocking any sign of the sun. The forest around them was vast and foreboding, and they had no map, no guide to show them a path back to safety. The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he couldn't let it show. His friends were counting on him. "We're not staying here," Denny declared, his voice cutting through the tension. "We must find a place to regroup and plan our next move. If there's more coming, we can't face it in this state." Eric pushed himself up, using his battered shield as leverage. He grimaced but nodded. "A warm fire wouldn't be the worst idea I've heard." Denny glanced at Selene, who winced as she shifted her weight. "Can you walk?" Selene mustered a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'll crawl if I have to, but I'm not staying in this cursed forest a moment longer." They moved slowly, the forest's eerie silence broken only by their uneven steps and the occasional crackle of ice underfoot. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the woods themselves held their breath, waiting for the next calamity to strike. Finally, they stumbled into a small clearing where the ground was firmer and less tangled with roots and frost. Eric dropped his shield with a clatter and gathered whatever dry twigs he could find. Selene sank to the ground, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. Denny stood at the edge of the clearing, Gungnir still in his grasp. He stared into the dark woods, where the trees whispered secrets to one another, in a language he couldn't understand. The memory of the spectral figure's voice haunted him, a gnawing reminder that danger loomed closer than ever. "Denny?" Selene's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to see her looking up at him, eyes soft but worried. "You need to rest too." He hesitated, then nodded, lowering himself next to her. The cold ground seeped through his clothes, but it was a minor discomfort compared to the weight pressing on his mind. He glanced at Eric, who had coaxed a small flame to life, the light casting flickering shadows across their faces. "We need to figure out what that warning meant," Eric said, breaking the silence. "Darkness that will test our hearts? That could mean anything. A new enemy? Some curse?" Denny's jaw tightened. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. We'll find answers, even if we have to go to the ends of the realms to get them." Selene's eyes met his, a spark of determination flaring amidst the exhaustion. "Then we'll start with the libraries of Asgard. If there's knowledge to be found, that's where we'll find it." The flame in Eric's makeshift fire pit crackled, sending embers spiraling into the air. Denny felt a flicker of hope for the first time since the battle ended. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and doubt, but it was a path they would walk together. And Denny vowed to be ready, no matter what the coming storm brought. The dawn arrived reluctantly, casting a pale, silvery light over the clearing. Denny's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but sleep had eluded him for most of the night. The memory of the spectral messenger's warning haunted him like a distant echo. The fire Eric had lit had long since died down. Selene stirred beside him, blinking awake as the first hints of morning touched the icy leaves overhead. She winced, stretching her injured leg. "We need to move soon," she said, her voice low but persistent. "Agreed," Eric replied, already busying himself with what little supplies they had left. "Think we can sneak back to Asgard without the entire realm noticing?" Denny's lips twitched into a small smile, but it didn't last. "If we're going to Asgard, we need a plan. The direct route isn't an option. Too many eyes, too much risk." "What about the old frost giant tunnels?" Selene suggested. "I've heard they weave beneath the realms, leading close to the borders of Asgard." "Those tunnels are ancient and unpredictable," Eric said, his tone skeptical. but at this point, they're probably safer than marching across open land. Denny nodded, weighing their options. The tunnels were dangerous, riddled with traps and creatures that had made their homes in the forgotten passageways. "All right," he said. "We head for the tunnels." With the decision made, they set about gathering their gear. Celine fashioned a crude crutch from a broken branch to help ease the strain on her leg. Eric secured his damaged shield. As they left the clearing, the frost-covered forest seemed to close in. The silence was interrupted only by the crunch of their boots on icy ground. After hours of navigating through the treacherous woods, they reached the mouth of the tunnels. The entrance yawned before them, dark and forbidding. "If this is the easy part, I'm not sure I want to know what's next." Denny took a deep breath, feeling the incredible damp air rush into his lungs. "Whatever's ahead, we face it together," he said, glancing at his friends. They nodded, their faces steeled with resolve. With that, they stepped into the darkness, the chill seeping deeper as the shadows swallowed them whole. The narrow tunnel walls seemed to breathe with an ancient, rhythmic pulse as Denny led the way. The air was damp and cold. "Keep your eyes open," Eric said, his voice low and edged with tension. "There's no telling what's taken up residence here." "Did anyone else hear that?" she whispered. Denny raised Gungnir, casting a wider circle of light around them. Eric's torch crackled, the sound magnified in the confined space. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. "It's watching us," he muttered. Before Denny could respond, the tunnel erupted into chaos. A blur of movement darted toward them from the darkness. "Watch out!" Denny shouted, thrusting Gungnir forward as the spear flared with energy. The strike connected with the creature's carapace. Eric lunged to the side, narrowly dodging a strike that would have taken his arm. He swung his torch in a wide arc. "It's not just one," she yelled, pointing down the tunnel as more blue eyes appeared, glistening like dark sapphires in the torchlight. Denny's pulse quickened. The tunnel was too tight, they couldn't move freely, and the hissing swarm was closing in. "Cover your eyes," he shouted. A light pulse exploded outward, illuminating the tunnel with a fierce, blinding glow. Eric blinked, vision swimming with spots of white. "Good thinking, Denny, but we need to keep moving before they regroup." Celine pushed off the wall, determination etched on her face despite the strain. "Agreed. Whatever those things are, they're not going to wait long." The echoes of their hurried footsteps bounced off the tunnel walls as Denny, Eric, and Celine ventured further into the labyrinthine underworld. Celine limped alongside Eric, her face pale but set with determination. "This place feels wrong," she said, eyes darting to the jagged shadows of the spear's glow. Eric nodded, gripping the hilt of his sword. "It probably has. Let's hope we're not giving it what it wants." A distant rumble caught Denny's attention, making him halt. He raised his hand, signaling the others to stop. "What's that?" Eric whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Suddenly, a fissure split open in front of them, and from its depths an icy wind surged up, carrying with it an eerie chorus of wails. "We need to move now," Eric shouted, pulling Celine forward as more cracks spiderwebbed under their feet. The figure spoke, its voice a shiver in the air, barely audible yet, as sharp as a blade. "Mortals, you trespass where only the forgotten dare roam." Denny stepped forward, Gungnir trembling in his grasp. "We mean no harm. We seek passage to Asgard." "Asgard is beyond this place, but your path is not without cost. The Guardian demands a tribute, a memory, a part of who you are." "Denny," Celine's voice was steady but strained. "If we don't do this, we won't leave here." With a deep breath, Denny stepped forward. "What kind of memory?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "A cherished one, a cornerstone of your being. Once given, it will be lost to you forever." Eric swallowed hard, stepping up beside Denny. His jaw was set, but the tremor in his hand betrayed his inner turmoil. "We don't have a choice, do we?" he muttered, staring into the void-like eyes of the Guardian. Celine moved forward despite the pain in her leg and the wariness carved into her features. "I'll go first," she said, her voice wavering but resolute. "What did you lose?" Eric asked, stepping closer to steady her. "The song. My mother sang it when I was little. I can't hear it anymore." "Take it, whatever it is," he said through gritted teeth. "I can't remember my first victory in the training yard. It's gone, Denny. The day I realized I could be more than just another warrior. It's just gone." But there was no time to waver. He met the figure's eyes and said, "I'm ready." Then, suddenly, it was gone. The warmth, the laughter, and the stars slipped through him like water, leaving an ache that threatened to unravel him. "You did well," Selene whispered, squeezing Denny's arm. He could see the pain behind her smile, mirrored in Eric's haunted expression. The path before them widened into an open chamber, vast and echoing, with ceilings that vanished into darkness. Ice crystals jutted from the floor and walls like frozen spears, catching the dim light from Gungnir and reflecting it in fractured beams. The beauty was cold and unforgiving, a reminder of the realm they had dared to enter. Denny took the lead, pushing forward with determined strides despite the lingering ache from the memory he had surrendered. The hollowness pressed at his chest, but he willed it away. This was not the time for regrets. Eric and Selene followed silently behind, each lost in their private pain. "What is this place?" Selene asked, her voice hushed as it echoed through the cavern. "An ice labyrinth," Eric answered, glancing warily at the maze of frozen spires and jagged corridors branching off in all directions. A defense mechanism to confuse invaders, separate them, break their will. The frost giants used them to trap their enemies. Denny nodded, the coldness of the truth settling over them. The labyrinth was as much a test of their unity as it was a barrier. "Stay close," Denny said, tightening his grip on Gungnir. "We move as one." They stepped into the maze, their breaths puffing out in visible clouds. The air grew colder with each step, the ice walls crackling as they passed, almost as if the labyrinth were alive and shifting in response to their presence. The silence was punctuated by faint sounds, whispers, nearly too soft to hear, and the occasional crack of ice beneath their boots. After a few turns, the feeling of disorientation began to set in. The corridors were eerily similar, each twist and curve leading to passages that mirrored the last. Every instinct told Denny they were going in circles, though he marked their path with subtle gouges in the ice with Gungnir's tip. "It feels like we're being watched," Selene whispered, glancing over her shoulder for the third time. Eric's eyes darted around. "That's because we probably are. The frost giants had ways of embedding guardians within these walls." The ice around them shimmered with an unnatural light, as if on cue, casting ghostly reflections that danced across their path. One reflection didn't match the others. A silhouette shaped like a towering figure, eyes gleaming like chips of blue fire. A deep rumble resonated through the labyrinth. The ice cracked and shifted, and the silhouette stepped forward, merging from the wall into reality. It was a frost warden, a towering sentinel of ice and shadow, its limbs spiked with jagged shards and eyes devoid of mercy. "Spread out!" Denny shouted, lunging to the side as the warden swung an arm the size of a tree trunk. The force of the blow sent a cascade of ice splinters raining down, narrowly missing Eric as he rolled to safety. Selene raised her hands, summoning energy that shattered against the warden's chest with little effect. It sounded between a roar and an avalanche, shaking the ground beneath them. "It's too strong," Eric yelled, trying to find an opening for his sword. His breath came in short gasps, the cold sapping their strength with every passing second. Denny's mind raced. The labyrinth's magic was ancient and powerful, but so was Gungnir. He gripped the spear tighter, feeling its pulse align with his heartbeat. He had to focus on commanding the weapon, as Odin had taught him. "Distract it," he shouted, eyes narrowing on a glowing rune etched in the warden's chest. A weak point, perhaps a binding sigil that animated the creature. Eric and Selene exchanged a look and nodded. Eric feinted to the left, drawing the warden's attention, while Selene summoned a shard of ice and launched it at the creature's face. It roared, disoriented for just a moment. Now. Denny thrust Gungnir forward, channeling all his energy into a sharp burst of power. The spear's tip glowed fiercely, striking the rune with a crack that echoed through the entire labyrinth. The warden froze, its body splitting along jagged seams as light spilled from within. A heartbeat later, it shattered into 1,000 shards, scattering like glass across the icy floor. Silence fell, broken only by their heavy breathing. Denny looked at his friends, relief mingled with exhaustion. "We need to keep moving before anything else decides to test us." Selene nodded, eyes shadowed with fatigue but fierce. "Let's not discover how many more of those things there are." They pressed on, deeper into the labyrinth, the cold and the echoes of battle trailing them like ghosts. But despite the daunting challenges, Denny felt a renewed resolve. Whatever Loki had planned, whatever waited for them beyond these walls, he would face it, no matter the cost. Loki paced deep within the darkened halls of his refuge, where the air felt thick with magic and echoes of forgotten battles. His long, lean figure cast elongated shadows that danced across the rough stone walls, moving like creatures with their minds. The firelight flickered wildly, as if in response to his agitation. This place, hidden beyond the reach of even the most devoted Aesir spies, pulsed with energy drawn from realms long ignored by Asgard. The trickster god's emerald eyes glowed with an intensity that could ignite the room. He traced a hand over a scrying pool at the center of the chamber, its surface swirling with silver threads of mist that showed glimpses of Denny, Eric, and Celine navigating the ice labyrinth. Their faces were etched with determination despite the frost clinging to their brows and the exhaustion dripping from their limbs. A twisted smile curled Loki's lips. "You're stronger than I thought, little brother," he murmured, the word brother slipping out like venom. The idea of sharing any bloodline with Denny, a half-breed child of Odin and a mortal, stirred his rage like oil thrown on a fire. The Allfather's hypocrisy was boundless. "Do you see them?" came a rasping and smooth voice from the shadows like wind over dry leaves. It was one of the ancient seeresses, cloaked in woven runes and mystery. She stepped forward, her pale eyes reflecting the shifting light. "They close in on your stronghold, guided by more than just bravery." Loki's fingers drummed on the edge of the scrying pool. He knew what she meant. The bond between the three was more than camaraderie. It was a force that defied the cold logic of power and betrayal. It was the kind of thing that had undone legends, including his well-laid plans in ages past. "Let them come," Loki said, his voice colder than the ice maze they traversed. "This is a game they do not know they're playing, and I have already set the rules." The seeress smiled a hollow, knowing smile. "What will you do when they reach the maze's heart and find what you have left for them?" Loki's grin widened, a gleam of mischief softening the sharpness in his eyes. "Ah, but that is the beauty of it. They will find not one fate, but a choice that will change the course of realms. And when they make it, they will be more useful to me than any captive." The seeress's smile faltered, her expression turning wary. "Do not underestimate them, Loki. The boy carries more of Odin's blood than even you suspect. The Allfather's gifts run deep." A flash of irritation sparked in Loki's eyes, and he stepped close enough that the fire's warmth should have stung. Odin's blood, yes, but without his wisdom. The boy is still tethered by sentiment and the weight of mortality. That will be his undoing. The seeress inclined her head, not convinced but wise enough to fall silent. She melted back into the shadows, leaving Loki to his plotting. He reached out, running a finger over the image of Denny holding Gungnir, the weapon crackling with the energy it was never meant for him to wield. A son of both Midgard and Asgard, walking the line between realms with an unearned certainty. Loki's smile thinned as the pool rippled. Beyond the maze, the tundra stretched into a cold, moonlit horizon. Glaciers glistened like jagged teeth under the stars, hiding secrets and sorrows alike. There, perched on the edge of the realm's heart, lay a fortress of ice and rune-bound stone, Loki's stronghold, nestled like a predator's den. And in its depths, a decision awaited that would unravel every plan or cement his victory. Loki closed his eyes, savoring the silence before the storm. "Come, little brother," he whispered to the wind. "Come and prove your worth." This tale continues next time on Tales from the Shadows, so be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Until next time, stay tuned, stay weird, and watch out for what lurks in the shadows.
This has been Tales from the Shadows, where the shadows speak the stories that will make you weak. Join us on this journey into the unknown. Tales from the shadows, where fear is shown. So subscribe and like, and don't be afraid to dive into the darkness where the shadows are laid.